You're ours now, officer, and we're going to do whatever we want with you. Officer Selena Vega was dragged into the heart of the riot, outnumbered, surrounded, and marked as prey. To the inmates, she looked like an easy hostage, a bargaining chip, a victim waiting to be broken. But Selena was a survivor. Before the badge, she had already survived the streets, the gangs, and the underground fight rings, places where losing meant death. As she sits bound by the prisoners, Selena learns the truth. The riot isn't random. It's cover for the most violent inmates to escape. Now she must decide: fight only to survive, or risk everything to stop killers from breaking free. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Selena Vega stood at her post in Stonewall Correctional Facility, her dark eyes scanning the prison floor with practiced precision. The morning light filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the worn concrete. Something felt off today. Whispers between inmates, subtle nods, tension crackling like static before a storm. "Morning, Vega," Derek Walsh called out as he passed, his weathered face showing hints of concern. "Inmates seem restless today." "I noticed," Selena replied, keeping her voice low. "Like they're waiting for something." She continued her rounds, boots clicking against the metal stairs as she climbed to the upper tier. The familiar sounds of prison life echoed through the halls. Metal doors clanging, distant conversations, the shuffle of feet. But underneath it all was an unsettling quiet, like a held breath. In the mess hall, hundreds of inmates sat at long metal tables, plastic trays arranged in neat rows. Selena positioned herself near the wall, watching. Small groups huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. Others sat alone, eyes darting around the room. Her instincts, honed from years on Houston's meanest streets, screamed danger. The first sign came when an inmate stood up suddenly, shoving his tray across the table. "This food tastes like trash," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. Another inmate rose, then another. Metal trays clattered to the floor. Selena's hand moved to her radio, but before she could call it in, chaos erupted. Tables flipped with tremendous crashes. Plastic trays became weapons, sailing through the air. Inmates surged forward in coordinated groups, overwhelming the guards stationed at the doors. The alarm began to wail, its piercing shriek adding to the mayhem. "Code Red! Code Red in the mess hall!" Selena shouted into her radio, backing toward the nearest exit. She saw Derek across the room, trying to maintain order as inmates streamed past him into the corridors. An inmate charged at her, and she sidestepped, using his momentum to slam him into the wall. Another came from behind. She felt hands grabbing at her uniform. She drove her elbow back hard, connecting with flesh, hearing a grunt of pain. The riot was spreading fast. Through the windows, she could see inmates flooding into the yard. Guards in riot gear were assembling, but they were outnumbered. The violence had been carefully planned. Time to catch them at their weakest. Selena fought her way toward the door, using every technique she knew to stay on her feet. An inmate swung a makeshift club. She ducked under it, swept his legs, kept moving. Her radio crackled with desperate calls from other sectors. The whole prison was erupting. The corridor outside the mess hall was a war zone. Inmates had armed themselves with whatever they could find. Broken chair legs, sharpened plastic, pieces of metal torn from walls. The air grew thick with tear gas as the response team tried to regain control. She made it halfway to the security station when her path was cut off. A group of inmates had formed a line across the hallway, armed with crude weapons. Behind her, more prisoners approached, cutting off her retreat. "Nowhere to run now, Officer Vega," one of them sneered. She recognized him. Martinez, serving 25 to life, a man with nothing left to lose. Selena took a fighting stance, her back against the wall. She might go down, but she'd make them work for it. The first one rushed her. She caught his arm, twisted hard, used him as a shield against the others. But there were too many. Rough hands grabbed her arms, her legs. She fought like a wild animal, breaking one man's nose with her elbow, stomping down hard on another's instep. Someone hit her from behind, making her vision blur. Her radio was torn away, smashing against the floor. They dragged her down the corridor toward Block C, her boots scraping against the concrete. Inmates lined the rails of the cell block, cheering and jeering as she was hauled past. The sound echoed off the walls, a terrible celebration of power turned upside down. "Not so tough now, are you?" Martinez laughed, his face inches from hers. She spat at him, earning a hard slap that made her ears ring. The group reached the center of Block C, where the riot was in full swing. Fires burned in trash cans. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic taste of violence. Selina could hear distant gunshots, the boom of flashbangs, but help seemed a world away. With brutal efficiency, they threw her to the floor. Her head cracked against the concrete, and for a moment, stars danced in her vision. She tried to rise, but boots kept her down. Around her, a circle of inmates gathered, their faces twisted with cruel anticipation. Selina lay there, tasting blood in her mouth, feeling the cold floor against her cheek. But deep inside, where no one could see, something else was stirring. Something dark and familiar. A part of herself she'd thought long buried. A part that remembered the savage rules of survival she'd learned long before she ever put on a guard's uniform. The inmates thought they had caught a helpless woman, an easy target. They didn't know what she really was. They hadn't seen her fight in the underground rings of Houston, hadn't watched her survive the brutal foster homes and gang-controlled streets. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. As the inmates crowded around her fallen form, shouting and laughing, Selina remained still, gathering her strength, waiting for her moment. Like a coiled snake, she knew when to strike, and when to play dead. The crowd of inmates pressed closer, their faces twisted with a mix of hatred and cruel excitement. Selina pushed herself to her knees, ignoring the throb where her head had hit the floor. Around her, the noise of the riot seemed to fade as dozens of eyes focused on her, sizing her up like vultures eyeing fresh meat. "Back off!" Rico Sanchez's voice cut through the chaos. The Latino gang leader shouldered his way through the crowd, his prison-issued shirt stretched tight across his chest. "Nobody touches her yet." Tommy Briggs stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Selina. Prison tattoos covered his thick neck, and his eyes held the dead stare of a natural predator. "Why the hell not? Guards ain't treated us so nice. Maybe it's time we return the favor." Selina kept her breathing steady, watching the power play unfold. More inmates gathered around, forming a tight circle. The air grew thick with tension and the smell of sweat. She counted faces, memorized positions, noted which ones seemed eager for violence and which ones held back. "Use your head for once, Briggs," Rico sneered, gesturing at Selina. "We got ourselves a hostage. That's leverage when the negotiators show up. But not if you animals can't control yourselves." Briggs took another step closer, his boots inches from Selina's knee. "Since when do you call the shots, Rico? Maybe your boys run things in the yard, but right now—" He looked around at the chaos of the riot. "Right now, ain't nobody in charge." More inmates pressed forward, shouting their opinions. Some backed Rico, seeing the logic in keeping a hostage. Others sided with Briggs, hungry for immediate violence. The crowd swayed like a drunk mob, pushing and shoving. "Look at her," one voice called out. "Acting all tough. Let's see how tough she really is." Hands grabbed at her uniform. Selina exploded into action. She drove her elbow up into a grabbing inmate's groin, then rolled away as he doubled over. Another tried to catch her arm. She twisted free and slammed her palm into his throat, sending him staggering back, gagging. "Get her!" Briggs roared. 3 inmates lunged forward. Selina managed to drop one with a kick to the knee, but the other 2 caught her arms. They yanked her back roughly, forcing her to her knees again. She struggled against their grip, muscles straining, but they held tight. Rico stepped closer, squatting down to look her in the eye. "Feisty one, ain't you? Good. You'll last longer that way." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Here's how it's gonna work, Officer Vega. You play nice, do what we say, and maybe you walk out of here when this is over. Fight us." He let the threat hang in the air. Selina jerked her head free of his grip. Her dark eyes swept the cell block, taking in every detail. Near the stairs, she spotted Martinez and his crew, still nursing their wounds from their earlier encounter. By the phones, another group huddled, glancing nervously between Rico and Briggs. Up on the second tier, more inmates watched the scene unfold, waiting to see which way the power would shift. "She broke my nose," Martinez called out, his voice thick and nasal. "I say we let Briggs have his fun." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Rico straightened up, his face darkening. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. The mob's bloodlust was rising, drowning out any thoughts of strategy or leverage. "You idiots want to throw away our best bargaining chip?" Rico shouted, trying to reassert control. "The cops will be here soon. We need something to negotiate with." "Plenty of other guards got caught in the riot," Briggs countered, moving behind Selina. "Don't need this one alive to bargain with." His rough hands seized her shoulders, fingers digging in painfully. "Besides, seems like she needs a lesson in respect." Selina felt Briggs's hot breath on her neck. The inmates holding her arms tightened their grip, anticipating resistance. Around them, the crowd grew louder, more agitated. The air crackled with violent possibility. But Selina wasn't seeing Briggs anymore. She wasn't seeing the riot, or the prison, or even the baying crowd of inmates. Her mind flashed back to darker places, to foster homes where locks meant nothing, to alleyways where mercy was a foreign word, to underground fighting rings where hesitation meant death. She felt the familiar ice spreading through her veins, felt her heart rate slow to a predator's steady rhythm. Her muscles relaxed, not in submission, but in preparation. The scared guard persona she'd worn for years peeled away like an old skin, revealing something much more dangerous underneath. Briggs's hands moved from her shoulders, one sliding down her arm while the other grabbed a fistful of her hair. He was saying something, threats probably, but Selina barely heard him. She was too busy noting his position, feeling his balance, calculating angles and leverage points. The crowd's shouting grew louder, demanding blood. Rico backed away, accepting his temporary defeat, already planning his next political move. The inmates holding Selina's arms adjusted their grip, ready for whatever Briggs had planned. But they had no idea what they were really holding on to. No idea of the violence they were about to unleash. As Briggs yanked her head back roughly, Selina's eyes hardened to obsidian chips, cold and deadly as gunmetal. The frightened guard was gone. In her place was something born in pain and forged in violence, something that had learned its lessons in places far worse than any prison. Time seemed to slow as Briggs yanked Selina's hair harder, forcing her head back at a painful angle. His other hand gripped her forearm, fingers digging into her flesh. The inmates holding her sides tightened their grip, expecting her to struggle. Instead, Selina went completely still. In one fluid motion, she trapped Briggs's wrist against her shoulder, twisting her body sharply. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the cell block like a gunshot. Briggs's scream came a heartbeat later, high-pitched and animal-like. The sound silenced the mob instantly. Briggs stumbled backward, clutching his mangled wrist to his chest. His face had gone pale, mouth working soundlessly as shock set in. The inmates holding Selina's arms loosened their grip reflexively, and she seized the moment. She drove her elbow into the ribs of the man on her right, feeling bones give way. As he doubled over, she ripped free of the other inmate's grasp and spun to face the crowd. Her eyes blazed with a cold fire that made several men step back. "Anyone else want to try?" Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. Gone was the professional tone of a corrections officer. This voice belonged to the streets, hard, dangerous, unafraid. Rico Sanchez stood frozen, his usual swagger replaced by wary calculation. Behind him, inmates shifted uneasily, looking at each other for cues on how to react. The predatory excitement that had filled the air moments ago had evaporated, replaced by something closer to fear. "You think because I wear this uniform, I'm soft?" Selina's lips curved in a cold smile that never reached her eyes. "I grew up in foster homes that would make your cells feel like the Hilton. Survived streets that would eat half of you alive." Her gaze swept the crowd, challenging anyone to meet it. "This prison? These walls? This is nothing compared to what I've seen." Briggs had backed away to the edge of the crowd, still cradling his shattered wrist. Blood dripped between his fingers, spattering on the concrete floor. The sight of the big man brought low, sent ripples of uncertainty through the mob. "You want to test me?" Selina continued, her voice dropping lower. "Go ahead. But understand something. I'm not some scared rookie guard who's never seen violence. I've fought my way through worse places than this. Anyone who thinks I'm an easy target," she gestured at Briggs, "they'll end up regretting it." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some inmates looked impressed, others angry, but all of them reassessed the woman before them. The guard uniform no longer seemed to define her. Instead, it looked like a thin veneer over something much more dangerous. Rico stepped forward, but carefully maintained his distance. Okay. Everyone calm down." He raised his hands, trying to regain control of the situation. "Nobody else needs to get hurt here." His eyes fixed on Selina with new respect and calculation. "But we still can't let you run free, Officer Vega. You understand that, right?" Selina met his gaze steadily. She could read the shifting dynamics in his expression. He was already thinking of ways to use her newfound reputation to his advantage. The other inmates watched the exchange intently, sensing another power play in motion. "Get some rope," Rico ordered, not taking his eyes off Selina. "We tie her up, but we do it proper. No more rough stuff." He raised his voice to address the crowd. "She stays alive and unharmed. Anyone touches her without my say-so answers to me. Clear?" A chorus of grudging agreements followed. 2 inmates hurried off to find restraints, while others maintained a wary circle around Selina. The mob began to disperse, breaking into smaller groups that whispered and gestured among themselves. "Smart move," Selina said quietly to Rico. "Smarter than your friend there." She nodded toward Briggs, who was being helped away by his supporters. Rico's lip curled. "Briggs ain't my friend, and he ain't smart enough to pour water out of a boot with instructions on the heel." He studied her face. "You, though, you're something else. Where'd you really learn to fight like that?" "Places you don't want to know about." Selina's tone made it clear the subject was closed. The inmates returned with rope, approaching her cautiously like animal handlers with a dangerous predator. Selina allowed them to bind her hands, knowing that fighting now would only lead to a worse situation. She had made her point, shown them what she was capable of. Now she needed to watch, wait, and plan her next move. As they secured the knots, movement on the second tier caught her eye. A scarred inmate leaned against the railing, observing the scene below with clinical interest. Marcus Reaper Cole. She recognized him from his file. One of the most feared men in the prison, known for his cunning as much as his capacity for violence. Their eyes met across the distance. Cole's lips twisted into a knowing smirk, and Selina saw recognition in his gaze, not of her face, but of what she was. Game recognized game. Predator recognized predator. He gave her a small nod, almost imperceptible, before pushing off from the railing and melting back into the shadows of the upper tier. Two inmates half-dragged, half-pushed Selina into a narrow cell, their grip rough but noticeably more careful than before. The concrete walls pressed close, making the space feel like a tomb. They shoved her down onto a thin mattress that reeked of sweat and despair. "Stay put," one growled, though his voice wavered slightly. Outside in the cell block, voices rose in heated argument. The noise bounced off the walls, turning the discussion into a jumbled mess of angry shouts and threats. Selina stayed silent, listening intently as the chaos slowly organized itself into clear sides. "She broke Briggs's wrist. We can't let that slide," someone yelled from the growing crowd. Murmurs of agreement followed. "Yeah, and what happens when the guards retake the block?" Rico's voice cut through the noise. "You want to explain a dead officer to the response team? Since when do you care about consequences, Rico?" One of Briggs's crew stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "Your boy Marcus watching from up there make you soft?" Selina's ears pricked up at that. So there was tension between Rico and Marcus Cole. She filed that information away, another piece in the puzzle of prison politics she was assembling. "Listen to yourselves," she called out, her voice carrying clear and steady. "Arguing like children while the clock's ticking?" Faces turned toward her cell. Rico pushed through the crowd, stopping just outside the bars. "Nobody asked for your opinion, officer." "No?" Selina leaned back against the wall, projecting calm despite her bound hands. "Then let me give you some facts instead. You kill me, every one of you gets the book thrown at them. Murder 1. No deals, no parole, no mercy." She looked directly at Rico. "But a live hostage? That's leverage. That's power." The crowd shifted uneasily. She could see the idea taking root in their minds, especially among the inmates with shorter sentences. Nobody wanted to throw away their chance at freedom. "She's playing us," one of Briggs's supporters spat. "Trying to save her own skin." "Am I?" Selina raised an eyebrow. "Tell me something. Who stands to gain if I die? The lifers? The ones who've got nothing to lose?" Her gaze swept the crowd. "Ask yourselves why they're so eager to see me dead. Maybe because they know a dead guard means you'll all go down with them?" Rico's eyes narrowed. She could almost see the wheels turning in his head as he looked at Briggs's crew with new suspicion. The division she'd highlighted was already there. She just had to make it impossible to ignore. "She's right about one thing," Rico said slowly. "A dead guard means we lose any chance of negotiating our way out of this." "Negotiating?" Another voice scoffed. "Since when are you in charge of negotiations, Rico?" "Since I'm the only one thinking straight." Rico whirled on the speaker. "You want to follow Briggs? The same Briggs who couldn't handle one woman without getting his wrist snapped? Maybe we should all just rush the fences and get shot instead." The mockery in his voice drew bitter laughter from some inmates. Briggs's supporters bristled, but they were outnumbered, and their leader was still nursing his injury somewhere out of sight. Selina watched the power dynamics shift in real time. Rico was smart enough to seize the moment, using her words to reinforce his own authority. But she could also see the calculation in his eyes. He knew she was manipulating the situation, and he was letting her do it because it served his purposes. "Here's what's going to happen," Rico announced, his voice carrying the weight of command. "The officer stays alive. She's our insurance policy. Anyone touches her without my say-so, they answer to me." He paused, letting that sink in. "And anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with my crew. As if on cue, several large inmates stepped forward to flank Rico. The message was clear. He had the numbers and the muscle to back up his words. Grumbling, the crowd began to disperse. Briggs's supporters skulked away, throwing dark looks at both Rico and Selina. The tension in the air remained thick, but the immediate threat had passed. Rico turned back to Selina's cell, gripping the bars as he leaned in close. "Don't think I don't see what you just did," he said quietly. "You're smart, I'll give you that. But push too far, and being smart won't save you." Selina met his gaze steadily. "I just pointed out the obvious, Rico. You're the one who turned it to your advantage." "Yeah?" His lips curled in a humorless smile. "Well, remember this. You might have some of these guys fooled with your tough act, but I grew up in the same kinds of neighborhoods you did. I know a street player when I see one. You're on thin ice, officer. Don't make me regret keeping you alive." "Wouldn't dream of it," Selina replied, allowing herself a small smirk as Rico backed away from the cell. She watched him walk away, gathering his lieutenants for a hushed conversation. In less than 10 minutes, she'd managed to drive a deeper wedge between the prison's factions and secure her own survival. For now, the smirk stayed on her face, knowing she'd just played them all against each other like pieces on a chessboard. The real question was how long she could keep the game going before someone decided to flip the board. The cell block had descended into chaos once again, but this time it was the chaotic revelry of inmates drunk on their temporary freedom. They ransacked the guard station, fought over contraband, and marked their territory with crude graffiti. The acrid smell of smoke drifted through the air. Someone had started a small fire with papers from the office. From her cell, Selina watched it all with sharp eyes. Most of the inmates were caught up in the frenzy, but she noticed two figures hanging back in the shadows of the upper tier. Leon Harker, a former mob enforcer serving life for multiple murders, and his constant shadow, the mountain of muscle known as Crusher Malone. They weren't celebrating. They were talking in low, urgent tones, just out of clear sight. Selina shifted position, pressing closer to the bars. The noise of the riot worked in her favor, covering any sound she might make as she strained to hear their conversation. "Timeline's tight," Harker's controlled voice drifted down. "Once they get the riot team mobilized." Crusher's deeper rumble cut in. "How long to clear the tunnel?" 2 hours, maybe 3. Depends how much debris we hit. But that passage under Block C maintenance is our only shot." Selina's breath caught. A maintenance tunnel? She knew the prison had been built on top of an older facility, with a network of service passages running beneath the blocks. Most had been sealed off decades ago, but clearly not all of them. "Rico and his boys are keeping everyone busy," Crusher said. "Nobody's even thinking about the maintenance room." "That's why I chose this block," Harker replied. "Perfect cover. By the time they realize we're gone, we'll be halfway to Mexico." Selina's jaw clenched. These weren't just angry inmates looking to cause trouble. This was a calculated escape plan. Harker and Crusher were using the riot as cover to break out through the underground tunnels. "What about the guard?" Crusher asked. "She's seen too much already." "Let Rico play his power games for now," Harker said dismissively. "When we're ready to move, she becomes a loose end. You can handle that part." "Been looking forward to it." Crusher's chuckle was dark with anticipation. Selina forced herself to stay still, even as her pulse quickened. She knew Harker's reputation. He wasn't just another thug. He was methodical, patient, and utterly ruthless. If he made it to the outside, there would be bodies in his wake. "Remember," Harker continued, "when the signal comes, we move fast. No hesitation, no witnesses." Their footsteps moved away, leaving Selina alone with the weight of what she'd learned. The riot wasn't random. It was orchestrated. A smokescreen for something far more dangerous. She thought about Harker's history. the trail of violence he'd left before his capture. If he escaped, that violence would start again. More victims, more families destroyed, more communities terrorized? Not if she could help it. Selina shifted back against the wall, mind racing. She was trapped in a cell, surrounded by hostile inmates, with no way to contact the outside. But she'd survived worse odds on the streets of Houston. The key would be information. She needed to know more about that tunnel, its access points, its vulnerabilities, and she needed allies, even temporary ones. Rico might be useful there. He clearly had his own agenda, and she doubted he knew he was just a pawn in Harker's game. A commotion near the guard station drew her attention. 2 inmates were fighting over a pack of cigarettes, while others cheered them on. The guards would be assembling riot teams by now, planning their response. But they'd be focused on retaking the block from the main force of prisoners. They'd never know about the escape attempt until it was too late. That left her, one woman against the worst criminals in the system. Her ribs ached where she'd been knocked around earlier, and her wrists were raw from the restraints. But pain was an old friend from her fighting days. Pain meant you were still alive, still in the game. She flexed her hands, feeling the familiar tension in her muscles. The street fighter she used to be, the one she'd tried so hard to bury under a guard's uniform, was stirring again. That part of her knew all about survival, about turning weakness into strength, about striking when enemies least expected it. "Got some water for you," a young inmate appeared at her cell, holding out a plastic cup. One of Rico's errand boys, probably sent to keep their hostage alive. "Thanks," Selina said quietly, accepting the cup through the bars. She studied him, barely 20, still soft around the edges. "What's your name?" "Tommy," he replied, shifting nervously. "Tommy Martinez." "Listen, Tommy," she kept her voice low, gentle. "When this is over, there's going to be a difference between the inmates who just got caught up in the riot and the ones who actively hurt people. Remember that." He blinked, uncertainty crossing his face, before he hurried away. Another seed planted. Every small interaction was a chance to shift the dynamics in her favor. The cup trembled slightly in her hands, not from fear, but from tightly controlled rage. Harker and Crusher thought she was just another obstacle to remove. They had no idea what she was capable of. Selina leaned back against the cold wall of her cell, letting the anger settle into cold determination. Her lips moved in a whisper, barely audible even to herself. "You're not making it out alive. Not one of you." The cell block had transformed into a wasteland of destruction. Torn mattresses littered the floor, mixed with scattered papers and broken furniture. Small fires burned in metal trash cans, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air was thick with smoke and tension. Selina watched from her cell as inmates prowled restlessly. The initial excitement of the riot had worn off, replaced by a gnawing hunger and growing frustration. They'd already ransacked the guard station's vending machines and looted the kitchen stores, but food was becoming scarce. 2 younger inmates fought over a bag of chips near the stairs, throwing wild punches until blood spattered on the concrete. No one bothered to break it up. In the far corner, a group huddled around a makeshift fire, burning paperwork and files from the office. "Getting ugly out there," Rico remarked, passing by her cell. He'd been checking on her periodically, making sure his bargaining chip stayed alive. "Might want to stay back from those bars." Selina nodded, but said nothing. She'd been carefully tracking the movements of key players throughout the afternoon. Harker and Crusher had disappeared into the maintenance area twice already. And Marcus Reaper Cole had been watching it all with those cold, calculating eyes of his. She'd seen the way Marcus tensed whenever Harker walked past. There was history there, bad blood that could be useful. But approaching him would be tricky. One wrong move, and she'd lose any chance of an alliance. A fight broke out near the guard station, bigger this time. Rico cursed and hurried over to restore order. Other inmates gravitated toward the commotion, drawn by the prospect of violence. This was her chance. Marcus stood alone by the second-tier railing, seemingly lost in thought. Selina caught his eye and gestured subtly for him to come closer. He hesitated, then slowly made his way down to her cell. "Quite a show they're putting on," Selina said quietly, nodding toward the fighting inmates. Marcus's scarred face remained impassive. "What do you want, guard?" "I want to talk about Leon Harker," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "And about how he's playing everyone in this block for fools?" A muscle twitched in Marcus's jaw. "Dangerous topic." "More dangerous to ignore it," Selina pressed. "I know about the tunnel, the escape plan, but I also know Harker's type. Once he's through that passage, how many people you think he'll leave alive to talk about it?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. He glanced around before stepping closer to the bars. "You don't know what you're talking about?" 3 years ago, Selina continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "you and Harker were involved in something. It went bad. He walked away clean while you took the fall. That's why you're still here and he's running things." The change in Marcus was subtle, but instant. His casual stance turned rigid, his eyes hardening with old hatred. "Who told you that?" "I pay attention," Selina said. "I see how you look at him. That's not just rivalry. That's the kind of hate that comes from betrayal." Marcus was silent for a long moment, his scarred fingers drumming against the bars. Finally he spoke. "What's your point?" "My point is, Harker's doing it again. Using people, creating chaos, and planning to leave everyone else to face the consequences. Including you." Selina met his gaze steadily. "But we could stop him." "We?" Marcus's laugh was harsh. "You're tied up in a cell, in case you hadn't noticed." "For now," Selina agreed, "but things change fast in a riot, especially when people start turning on each other." More shouts erupted from the guard station as the fight intensified. Rico's voice rose above the chaos, trying to restore order. The acrid smell of burning plastic drifted through the air. "Harker has his crew," Marcus said. "Crusher, Rico, at least 6 others. What exactly do you think you and me could do against those odds?" "You know these men," Selina said. "Their weaknesses, their rivalries. I know how to fight dirty. Really dirty. Together, we could tear their plan apart piece by piece." Marcus studied her face. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Selina replied honestly. "Just like I shouldn't trust you. But right now, we both want the same thing, to see Harker's plans fall apart." A crash echoed through the block as someone threw a chair from the upper tier. The fires were growing larger, casting wild shadows everywhere. The situation was deteriorating by the hour. Marcus glanced toward the maintenance area, then back at Selina. "If, and I mean if, I helped you, what's in it for me? When this is over, I'll tell the warden how you helped stop a mass escape attempt," Selina said. "That kind of cooperation looks good on a parole hearing. Really good." She could see the calculations running behind his eyes. Marcus had been inside for 8 years, with at least 4 more before his first parole chance. A positive report from a guard could shave significant time off that sentence. Finally, he extended his hand through the bars. "You double-cross me. You'll wish Harker had killed you first." Selina clasped his hand firmly. "Same goes for you." They shook once, a brief gesture that could have looked casual to any observers. But as their hands separated, Selina caught something in Marcus's eyes, a flicker of something unreadable behind his calm facade. She'd made her move, gained an ally, but she knew better than to fully trust anyone in these walls. The fires burned higher as evening approached. Soon, Harker would make his move toward the tunnel. Selina settled back in her cell, watching Marcus disappear into the crowd of restless inmates. The game was changing. She just hoped she'd chosen her pieces wisely. Marcus returned an hour later, his face tight with urgency. "Rico!" he called out. "Got trouble in the showers. Water's backing up, flooding the whole damn place. Could flood the tunnel access if we don't deal with it." Rico cursed, glancing at Selina's cell. "What's that got to do with her?" "She worked maintenance detail supervision," Marcus said smoothly. "Knows the system better than anyone here. 5 minutes with her, we fix it before it becomes everyone's problem." Rico hesitated, then nodded grudgingly. "Fine, but if she tries anything—" He left the threat hanging as he unlocked the cell. Selina kept her expression neutral as Marcus grabbed her arm, leading her toward the shower area. His grip was firm but not brutal, just enough to look convincing to watching eyes. The shower room was dark and humid, water dripping somewhere in the shadows. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, creating strange patterns on the wet tile floor. Marcus released her arm once they were inside. "We don't have long," he muttered. "Harker's crew is getting antsy. They're planning to move tonight, after the second shift change outside." "How many tunnels?" Selina asked quietly, rubbing her wrists where the restraints had been. "2 main passages. One under the—" A sudden movement in the shadows cut him off. Tommy Briggs stepped into view, his broken wrist wrapped in a makeshift splint. Behind him, 3 other inmates emerged from the darkness. "Well, well," Briggs sneered. "Ain't this cozy?" Reaper and the guard having a private chat. Selina's muscles tensed. She recognized the others, all Briggs's crew, all violent offenders with nothing to lose. They spread out, blocking the exit. "This isn't your business, Tommy," Marcus warned, his voice low and dangerous. "Made it my business when that guard broke my wrist," Briggs spat. "Now I'm going to break a lot more than that." They attacked in a rush. Briggs and 1 other went for Marcus while 2 charged Selina. The confined space of the shower room made it impossible to retreat. Selina met the first attacker head-on, ducking under his wild swing. She drove her knee into his groin, then grabbed his hair as he doubled over. In one violent motion, she slammed his head against an exposed pipe. The impact echoed through the room like a gong. Behind her, Marcus fought with brutal efficiency. His makeshift shiv, a sharpened toothbrush, found one attacker's shoulder. The man screamed, stumbling backward into the shower stalls. The second inmate attacking Selina was bigger, more cautious. He feinted left, then rushed right, trying to pin her against the wall. She twisted at the last second, letting him crash into the tile. Before he could recover, she drove her elbow into the base of his skull, then again into his kidney. "You're dead!" Briggs howled, swinging a piece of broken pipe at Marcus. "Both of you!" Marcus dodged the wild swing, but the pipe caught him across the shoulder. He grunted in pain, but managed to maintain his grip on the shiv. In close quarters, he drove the weapon into Briggs's thigh. Selina's attacker was still moving, trying to grab her legs. She stomped down hard on his hand, feeling fingers crack under her boot. When he tried to rise, she kicked him square in the face. Blood sprayed across the wet floor. The fight had lasted less than a minute, but the shower room looked like a war zone. Steam rose from the hot water pipes, mixing with the metallic scent of blood. One of Briggs's men lay motionless by the pipe. Another clutched his shattered hand, moaning. Briggs himself was on his knees, Marcus's shiv still buried in his leg. "You crazy bitch," he gasped, glaring at Selina. "You're supposed to be weak. Supposed to be." "Supposed to be what?" Selina grabbed his hair, yanking his head back. "An easy target? A helpless guard?" She leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I grew up fighting animals twice your size in foster homes that would have made this prison look like summer camp." Footsteps pounded in the corridor outside. The noise had drawn attention. Rico appeared in the doorway, flanked by two other inmates. "Jesus Christ," Rico muttered, taking in the scene. "What happened here?" "Briggs and his boys jumped us," Marcus said calmly, wiping blood from his knuckles. "Thought they'd settle some scores. Didn't work out like they planned." Rico's eyes moved from the unconscious inmates to Selina, who still held Briggs by the hair. Something like respect or fear flickered across his face. "Get them out of here," Rico ordered his men. "Take Briggs to medical before he bleeds out, and keep your mouths shut about this." They dragged Briggs away, his curses echoing down the corridor. His crew followed, one supporting another, leaving trails of blood on the wet floor. Selina leaned against the wall, her heart still pounding. Her knuckles were split and bleeding, her prison uniform spattered with other people's blood. She could feel bruises forming where she'd taken hits. Rico pointed at her. "Back to your cell. Now." She didn't argue. As Marcus led her back, she caught glimpses of faces watching from the shadows. Some showed fear, others calculation. The story would spread quickly, how Officer Vega had fought alongside Reaper himself and left Briggs's crew broken and bleeding. She'd survived, but she knew she'd crossed a line. There would be no more pretending to be just another guard caught in the riot. She'd shown her true face, the street fighter, the survivor. And in a place like this, that kind of reputation brought its own dangers. The night wrapped Block C in shadows, broken only by the dim emergency lights that cast an eerie glow through the tiers. Most inmates had settled into an uneasy sleep, their snores and occasional mutters echoing off concrete walls. Selina lay still in her cell, counting the minutes, waiting for the perfect moment. She'd noticed earlier that Rico's night watch was sloppy. Too few men, too many blind spots. When the guard nearest her cell nodded off for the third time, she made her move. The lock was already compromised from the riot. It took only a gentle touch to slide it open without sound. Selina's muscles ached from the shower room fight, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside. She pressed herself against the wall, becoming one with the darkness. Years of working these blocks had taught her every corner, every shadow. Now those lessons kept her invisible as she crept toward the stairs. The metal steps could betray her with a single creak. She tested each one carefully, distributing her weight like she used to when sneaking out of foster homes. Third step from the top, always squeaky. She remembered that from her rounds. Selina skipped it entirely, stretching her leg to the next one up. At the top tier, she paused behind a support column. 2 inmates were supposed to be watching this section, but she could hear them arguing about cigarettes somewhere on the far end. Amateur hour. In a real prison riot, you never bunch your guards together. The security camera hung limply from its mount, wires exposed where rioters had torn at it. Selina reached up, fingers probing delicately through the damage. The power supply was intact. They'd only broken the mounting and data cables. More importantly, the indicator light still had juice. Her hands moved with practiced precision, twisting bare copper strands together. This wasn't her first time working with electronics. She'd learned basic wiring during her maintenance supervision duties. The light flickered weakly as connections sparked. "Come on," she whispered, adjusting the wires again. The light stabilized, dim but steady. Selina took a deep breath and began tapping the power wire against the ground wire. Short, short, short. Long, long, long. Short, short, short. The universal distress signal, SOS. Over and over she repeated it, praying someone outside was paying attention. A noise below made her freeze. Footsteps. She quickly secured the wires to maintain the signal pattern and melted back into the shadows. The arguing guards had finally decided to do their rounds. Selina moved like a ghost along the tier, using the darkness between emergency lights as cover. She had to get back before anyone noticed her cell was empty. The steps were trickier going down. One wrong move would send her tumbling and wake the whole block. She made it to the bottom just as voices approached from around the corner. Without hesitation, she rolled underneath the stairwell, pressing herself into the narrowest shadow. 2 pairs of boots walked past, their owners still arguing about cigarettes. When they were gone, Selina slipped back to her cell. The sleeping guard hadn't moved. She eased the door closed and lay down, heart pounding but hope rising. Derek Walsh would be out there. He always worked nights. He was military before corrections, knew Morse code. If anyone would spot her signal, it would be him. An hour later, Marcus appeared at her cell. Rico had put him in charge of checking on her periodically after the shower room fight. Smart move. Everyone knew Reaper's reputation would keep other inmates from trying anything stupid. "Can't sleep," he whispered, leaning against the bars. Selina sat up slowly. "Just thinking about tomorrow." "Yeah?" His scarred face was unreadable in the dim light. "What about it?" "Things are going to change," she said quietly. "The ones outside, they'll come eventually. Not just a reaction team. They'll bring everything." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You sound pretty sure about that." "I am." Selina stood, moving closer to the bars. "This riot? It's not going to end how Harker and his crew think. The tunnel plan, using me as a shield. None of it matters if enough force hits this block. Maybe," Marcus's voice was neutral, "or maybe you're just telling yourself that to feel better." "I don't need to feel better," Selina said, letting steel enter her tone. "I need to be ready. The tide is turning, Marcus. You might want to think about which side you're really on when it does." He nodded slowly, but something about his smirk made her skin crawl. It lingered too long, held too much secret amusement. Like he knew something she didn't, or was playing a game she couldn't see. "Get some rest, officer," he said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be interesting." He pushed off from the bars and melted into the darkness of the block. Selina lay back down, but sleep felt impossible now. Her signal was out there, flashing its steady SOS into the night. She pictured Derek outside, his sharp eyes catching the pattern, understanding its meaning. Help would come. She believed that. The question was whether she could trust Marcus when it did. The night stretched on, filled with the sounds of restless inmates and distant shouts from other blocks. Somewhere in the darkness, her tiny light kept blinking its message of hope and defiance. Short, short, short. Long, long, long. Short, short, short. A reminder that even in the heart of chaos, she wasn't as trapped as they thought. The morning light crept through the high windows of Block C, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn floor. Selina sat with Marcus and 3 other inmates, Carlos, Big Mike, and Thompson, in the relative privacy of an empty cell, planning their move against Harker's escape crew. "The tunnel entrance is behind the old maintenance room," Marcus explained, sketching a rough map with chalk on the concrete floor. "They've got tools stashed there. Been digging for months. Tonight's the break." Selina studied the other 3 men carefully. They weren't part of any major prison gang, which made them valuable. Neutral parties who had nothing to gain from Harker's escape plan succeeding. Carlos was serving 5 years for fraud. Big Mike was in for assault, but had found religion inside, and Thompson was a former accountant, doing time for embezzlement. "We hit them here." Selina pointed to a narrow corridor leading to the maintenance room. "It's tight. They can't bring numbers through there. We take position around this corner, catch them by surprise." "What's stopping them from just overwhelming us?" Thompson asked, nervously adjusting his glasses. "Harker's got at least 8 guys." "Because they won't expect resistance," Marcus answered. "They think they've got everyone scared or bought off. Plus, they'll be focused on moving their equipment. Perfect time to strike." Big Mike cracked his massive knuckles. I'm in. Harker and his crew think they run this place, but they're just bullies. Time someone stood up to them. Carlos? Selena looked at the former con artist. We need your skills for this. Carlos nodded slowly. I can create a distraction in the main area, keep the other inmates occupied. Maybe start a fight over the remaining food supplies. Good. Selena felt a flutter of hope. These men weren't hardened criminals like Harker's crew, but they had skills that could turn the tide. We move at sunset. That's when they'll make their play. They spent the next hour going over positions and signals. Selena couldn't shake a nagging feeling about Marcus. Something in the way he kept glancing at the door, how his answers seemed just a beat too rehearsed. But she needed him. His reputation alone would keep many inmates from interfering. As the day wore on, tension built in the block. Inmates were restless, sensing something was coming. Carlos did his part, starting arguments about food distribution that kept most attention focused on the main area. Selena and her small team slowly made their way toward the maintenance corridor, using the chaos as cover. 5 minutes, Marcus whispered as they crouched in their positions. They'll be moving soon. Big Mike and Thompson took up positions behind an overturned cart, while Selena and Marcus waited around the corner. The corridor was dark, lit only by a single emergency light that buzzed fitfully overhead. Footsteps approached, multiple sets, trying to move quietly. Selena tensed, ready to spring the ambush. But something felt wrong. Marcus had shifted slightly behind her. His breathing changed. It happened in an instant. Marcus lunged forward, driving a sharpened piece of metal deep into Big Mike's back. The big man went down with a surprised grunt, blood spreading across his prison jumpsuit. Thompson tried to run, but Marcus caught him with a savage backhand that sent his glasses flying. "Sorry, officer," Marcus sneered, grabbing Selena's arm before she could react. "But Harker made me a better offer. A spot on his escape team." More footsteps now. Harker's crew emerging from the shadows. Leon Harker himself stepped forward, his calculated eyes taking in the scene. "Well done, Reaper," he said calmly. "I was wondering if she'd take the bait." Selena fought against Marcus's grip, but 2 more inmates grabbed her arms. She caught a glimpse of Carlos trying to run, only to be caught and beaten down by Harker's men. "You really should be more careful who you trust," Marcus taunted, twisting her arm painfully. "Did you think I'd choose your side over a chance at freedom? I've got 20 years left on my sentence. Harker's offering me a way out." "You're a dead man," Selena spat, earning herself a hard punch to the stomach that doubled her over. "Enough playing?" Harker ordered. "Tie her up. We move now." Rough hands forced Selena to her knees. Someone yanked her arms behind her back, binding them tight with strips torn from a bedsheet. She could feel blood running from her split lip, taste copper in her mouth. "What about these 3? One of Harker's men asked, gesturing to Big Mike, Thompson, and Carlos. "Big Mike's probably dead already," Marcus said with a shrug. "Lock the other 2 in a cell. By the time anyone finds them, we'll be long gone." They dragged Selena to her feet. Through blurred vision, she saw Big Mike's still form, Thompson's unconscious body being hauled away, Carlos stumbling as they shoved him into a cell. All her plans, all her careful preparation, undone by trusting the wrong person. Marcus grabbed her hair, forcing her to look at him. "You know what your problem is, officer? You still think there's good in people, but in here, we're all monsters. Some of us just hide it better than others." The group moved toward the maintenance room, Selena stumbling between her captors. Behind them, Marcus's laughter echoed off the concrete walls, mixing with the distant sounds of riot and chaos from the main block. Her signal to the outside world now seemed pathetically naive, a desperate hope crushed under the weight of prison reality. The maintenance corridors beneath Stonewall Correctional Facility were a maze of concrete and shadow. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead at irregular intervals, casting alternating patches of stark brightness and murky darkness. The air grew thicker with each descending step, heavy with the musty scent of age and decay. Harker's crew moved with practiced efficiency, 4 men in front clearing the way, 2 flanking Selina with tight grips on her arms, and 3 bringing up the rear, including Marcus. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the tunnel walls, creating a disorienting chorus of noise that made it difficult to track movement. "Watch those pipes," Harker called from the front. "One wrong move, and the whole prison will know we're down here." Selina stumbled deliberately, using the moment to scan her surroundings. Old junction markers were still visible on the walls. B7, C4, D1, remnants from when these tunnels served as maintenance routes. She committed each turn to memory. Right at the first fork, left at the fallen lighting fixture, straight past the rusted water main. "Move faster," Marcus growled, shoving her forward. She caught herself against the damp wall, feeling decades of grime under her palm. Above them, vibrations carried through the ceiling, heavy boots and equipment being moved into position. The SWAT team would be setting up their breach points, guided by the coordinates she'd managed to signal to Derek. But they wouldn't know about these tunnels. The blueprints they had wouldn't show this ancient network of passages. "They're getting ready up there," one of Harker's men said nervously. "Maybe we should—" "Shut up," Harker cut him off. "Everything's timed perfectly. By the time they breach, we'll be halfway to the river tunnel." They reached a larger chamber, clearly their main workspace. Tools were scattered around, pickaxes, shovels, even some power equipment they'd somehow smuggled in. A crude map was chalked on one wall, showing their planned route to freedom. Selina noted every detail while keeping her head down, playing the part of the defeated captive. "Secure her to that pipe," Harker ordered. "We need to move this equipment first." They forced her to sit against a thick water main, using chains they'd stolen from the prison workshop to bind her legs and torso. The metal was cold against her skin, biting into her already rope-burned wrists. "Not so tough now, are you?" Marcus taunted, squatting down to her level. "All that street fighter reputation, and here you are, just another helpless guard." Selina let her shoulders slump, avoiding eye contact. Let them think she was broken. Let them get comfortable. Above them, more vibrations, the SWAT team moving into final position. She could almost picture Derek coordinating with them, planning their entry points. The escape crew worked quickly, passing tools and supplies through a partially excavated tunnel that disappeared into darkness. They'd clearly been at this for months, maybe longer. Patient, methodical. No wonder no one had detected it. "Time check," Harker called out. 40 minutes until shift change," one of his men answered. "That's when they'll make their move up top." "Perfect. We'll be through the last wall by then. Once we breach the river tunnel, it's a straight shot to the drainage outlet." Selina listened to their movements, tracking each person's position by sound. Marcus and 2 others were loading equipment. Harker supervised from near the tunnel entrance. 3 men guarded the approach from the prison. 2 more worked with picks at the far wall, carefully breaking through to what must be an old storm drain. A particularly loud thud from above made everyone freeze. "They're getting ready to breach," Harker said calmly. "Right on schedule. Pack it up. We move in 10 minutes." The crew worked faster now, anxiety making them sloppy. Tools clanged against each other, boots scuffed on concrete. Breathing grew heavier in the confined space. Selina kept her head down, but her muscles were coiled tight, ready. She tested the chains subtly, feeling for weak points. They'd been hasty with the bindings, more concerned with speed than security. One link felt slightly warped, probably damaged during their theft from the workshop. If she could get enough leverage— "Hey!" one of the tunnel diggers called out. "I think we're through." "I can feel a draft." Excitement rippled through the group. Freedom was literally within reach. They clustered around the breakthrough point, passing tools forward to widen the hole. "Beautiful," Harker said, examining their work. "Marcus, get the first group ready. We'll send them through while we deal with our guest here." The meaning was clear in his tone. Selina wouldn't be leaving these tunnels alive. She kept her head down, hair falling forward to hide her face. Let them think she was crying. Let them think she'd given up. More vibrations from above. Stronger now. The SWAT breach was imminent. But they'd hit the wrong areas, waste precious time searching the cell blocks while Harker's crew slipped away through these forgotten tunnels. Unless someone could stop them here, underground, where the real battle needed to be fought. "Please," she whispered, adding a tremble to her voice. "Please don't." Marcus laughed. "Now she begs. Should have thought about that before playing hero." Selina stayed silent, shoulders shaking as if sobbing. But her fingers were working at the chains, finding that weak link, preparing for the moment that was coming. Above her head, the final preparations for breach were reaching their crescendo. Down here in the darkness, a different kind of countdown was running. Let them think she was finished. Let them think they'd won. The true fight was just beginning. "We need her," Harker announced, studying the narrow gap they'd created. "The breach is smaller than we thought. Someone her size needs to go through first. Secure the rope on the other side." Marcus stalked over to Selina, keys jingling in his hand. "Don't try anything stupid." He crouched behind her, working at the chains. "One wrong move and I'll snap your neck before you can blink." The chains fell away with a heavy clank. Selina's muscles screamed as circulation returned, but she kept her head down, maintaining the facade of defeat. Two men hauled her to her feet, half dragging her toward the breakthrough point. "See that metal bracket on the other side?" Harker pointed through the gap. "Thread this rope through it, then give us 3 tugs when it's secure. Try to run, and we'll put you down before you make it 10 feet. Selina nodded weakly, accepting the coiled rope with trembling hands. She could barely fit through the opening, jagged concrete scraping her shoulders as she squeezed past. The tunnel beyond was older, cruder, a forgotten storm drain from the prison's early days. She worked quickly, threading the rope as instructed. Her movements were clumsy, exaggerated, the performance of someone physically and emotionally broken. Behind her, she could hear them discussing who would go through next. 3 tugs, remember? Harker called through the gap. Then we'll send the first team. Selina yanked the rope 3 times, then pressed herself against the wall beside the opening. In the darkness, she could make out Marcus's face appearing first, followed by his shoulders as he started to squeeze through. She struck like a coiled snake. Grabbing his hair, she slammed his head against the concrete edge of the gap. Once, twice, bone cracked on the 3rd impact. Marcus went limp, half in and half out of the opening, blocking it. "You idiot!" Someone on the other side fired blindly through the gap. The shot went wide, sparking off the tunnel wall. Selina was already moving. She yanked Marcus's body the rest of the way through, searching him quickly. There, in his waistband, a crude shiv made from sharpened steel. She grabbed it just as another inmate forced his way through the opening. She met him with the blade, driving it deep. Hot blood sprayed across her face as he stumbled backward, clutching at the wound. Behind him, someone else was trying to squeeze through. Selina kicked the man into him, sending them both sprawling. "Kill her!" Harker's voice echoed from the other chamber. "Don't let her!" The rest was drowned out by gunfire. Bullets pinged off concrete, filling the narrow space with deafening noise. Selina pressed herself flat against the wall, waiting for the inevitable pause as they reloaded. The moment it came, she moved. Another inmate had made it through. She recognized him as one of Briggs's old crew. He swung a length of pipe at her head. Selina ducked under it, driving her shoulder into his gut. As he doubled over, she brought the shiv up under his ribs. Jesus Christ! The next man through the gap tried to retreat at the sight of his fallen companion. Selina caught his ankle, yanking him off balance. His head hit the floor with a wet crack. More gunfire forced her back into cover. She could hear Harker shouting orders, organizing his remaining men. The gap was their bottleneck. They could only come through one at a time. But she was trapped on this side, unable to retreat without exposing herself to their guns. Vibrations shook dust from the ceiling. The SWAT team was making their move above. Down here, Selina's world had narrowed to the 10 feet of tunnel around her, the shiv in her hand, and the blood pounding in her ears. "She's just one woman!" Harker's voice carried through the gap. "Rush her together!" Two came through almost simultaneously, making it halfway before getting tangled in the bodies of their fallen companions. Selina was on them before they could right themselves. The shiv found one's kidney. She grabbed the other's head and slammed it into the wall until he stopped moving. Something heavy impacted the wall near her position. They were using the pickaxes now, trying to widen the gap. Chips of concrete peppered her face. She wiped blood from her eyes, breathing hard. "Harker!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the tunnel walls. "Your crew's dead! It's over!" A single gunshot answered her. The bullet struck near her feet. "It's not over until I say it's over," Harker called back. "And you're going to die down here, Vega. Slow and alone in the dark." More impacts against the wall. They were making progress, widening the breach. Soon they'd be able to rush her properly. Selina looked down at the bodies around her, then at the shiv in her bloody hand. She'd gone from prey to predator in the space of minutes, just like in the old days on Houston's meanest streets. She could hear Harker directing his remaining men, his voice tight with controlled fury. The sound of pickaxes kept steady rhythm against the concrete. Above, more vibrations as SWAT cleared the prison block by block, unaware of the real fight happening beneath their feet. Selina adjusted her grip on the shiv, feeling the crude weapon's weight. 6 years of playing it straight, wearing the badge, following the rules. But now, in these dark tunnels, she'd been forced to become something else again. Something ruthless and brutal and terribly familiar. She moved silent as a shadow through the carnage she'd created, positioning herself for what would come next. Let them widen the gap. Let them think numbers would save them. She was done being the victim. The pickaxes kept swinging, concrete crumbling bit by bit. Selina waited in the darkness, blood-soaked and patient, the shiv ready in her hand. The darkness pressed in around Selina as she moved through the maintenance tunnels. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, and the faint echo of voices bounced off concrete walls. She kept one hand trailing along the rough surface, using it to guide her while her eyes adjusted to the dim emergency lighting. Her clothes were soaked with blood, some hers, most not. The shiv felt natural in her grip now, like an extension of her arm. She'd spent years trying to forget how this felt, the predatory focus that came with hunting other humans. But her body remembered. A scuff of boots against concrete made her freeze. Someone was trying to be quiet and failing. Selina pressed herself into an alcove, controlling her breathing. The footsteps grew closer. "I don't see anything," a whispered voice called back the way it had come. "Maybe she went—" Selina struck before he could finish. Her arm locked around his throat from behind, cutting off both air and sound. He tried to cry out, but only managed a wet gurgle. His fingers clawed at her forearm as she maintained the pressure, waiting for his struggles to weaken. When he finally went limp, she lowered him silently to the ground. One less of Harker's crew to worry about. More voices echoed from a connecting tunnel. They were spreading out to search for her. Selina moved toward the sound, keeping to the shadows. The emergency lights cast long fingers of darkness that she used for cover. "Check that corner," someone shouted. "Don't let her!" Heavy footsteps charged toward her position. A big inmate, she recognized him as one of Rico's old enforcers, came barreling around the corner with a metal pipe raised high. His momentum carried him right past her hiding spot. Selina exploded into motion, driving the shiv deep into his thigh. He screamed as the blade found the big artery there, dropping the pipe with a clang that echoed through the tunnels. She left him clutching his leg, blood pumping between his fingers. His screams would draw the others. Good. Let them come running. Let them see what happened to their friend. Fear would make them sloppy. Selina retrieved the dropped pipe, testing its weight. The metal was cold and solid in her grip, a better weapon than the shiv for what was coming. She could hear them now, multiple sets of footsteps converging on their fallen companion's position. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Look at all the blood. Spread out, another voice commanded. She has to be close. Selina waited until they separated, then moved. The pipe whistled through the air, catching the nearest searcher in the back of the head. He dropped without a sound. She was already moving to her next target before the body hit the ground. This one saw her coming. He backpedaled, fumbling for a weapon, but Selina was faster. The pipe caught him in the throat. He went down gagging, hands clutching his crushed windpipe. "She's here!" someone screamed. "Oh, God! She's—" The tunnels amplified their panic. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions as they tried to regroup. Selina moved like a ghost through the darkness, striking and vanishing before they could organize a defense. One tried to run. She caught him from behind, driving the shiv into his kidney. His scream bounced off the concrete walls, mixing with the sounds of his companion's terror. "Where is she?" a voice called out. "I can't see." The pipe silenced him mid-sentence. Bone cracked under the impact. More screaming, more running footsteps. The tunnels had become a maze of fear, with Selina as its demon. She found two trying to set up an ambush of their own. They had positioned themselves on either side of a junction, waiting for her to pass between them. Instead, she came from above, dropping from exposed pipes onto the first man's shoulders. The pipe caved in his skull before his partner could react. The second man fired blindly into the darkness, his shots deafening in the enclosed space. Selina rolled behind a support column, waiting for the telltale click of an empty chamber. When it came, she surged forward. The pipe took him in the chest, driving the air from his lungs. A second swing ensured he wouldn't get it back. More gunfire erupted from further down the tunnel, Harker's remaining men firing at shadows. Selina used the noise to mask her movement, circling behind their position. One man's fingers squeezed the trigger until his gun clicked empty. When he turned to reload, she was there. His partner tried to bring his weapon to bear, but Selina was already inside his guard. The pipe caught him under the chin, snapping his head back. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of water and the pain of the men. Somewhere ahead, she could hear heavy breathing. Harker and Crusher, the last ones standing. Their footsteps echoed as they retreated deeper into the maintenance shaft. "She's not human," someone whispered. Probably Crusher, his usual bravado replaced by naked fear. "Did you see what she did to them?" "Shut up," Harker hissed back. "Just shut up and keep moving." Selina followed the sound of their voices, pipe in one hand and bloodied shiv in the other. The emergency lights cast her shadow long and distorted against the tunnel walls. She didn't try to hide her footsteps now. Let them hear her coming. Let the fear build with each echo. The tunnels stretched ahead into darkness, carrying the sound of Harker and Crusher's panicked retreat. They were running now, all thoughts of escape forgotten in their desperation to get away from the monster they'd created. But Selina kept pace, moving with predatory patience. They had nowhere left to go. Harker and Crusher burst through the rusted maintenance gate, their boots crunching on dead leaves. The autumn air hit them like a slap after the stale tunnel atmosphere. Trees loomed ahead, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers into the cloudy sky. Selina emerged right behind them, blood still dripping from her weapons. Her eyes had adjusted to the darkness, giving her an almost feral appearance as she tracked their movement. The forest stretched endlessly before them. If they made it into those trees, they'd vanish like smoke. "Split up!" Harker shouted, already veering left. Crusher hesitated for a moment, his massive frame silhouetted against the tree line. That moment of indecision was all Selina needed. She charged straight at him, pipe raised. Crusher's instincts finally kicked in, and he brought up his arms just in time to block the strike. The impact still sent shock waves through his forearms. "You ain't taking me back inside," he growled, throwing a haymaker that would have knocked out a smaller opponent. But Selina was already moving, ducking under the punch and driving her shoulder into his midsection. Despite her fierce charge, it was like hitting a brick wall. Crusher barely stumbled, his huge hands locked around her arms, yanking her off her feet. She slammed the pipe into his ribs, drawing a grunt of pain, but his grip didn't loosen. "Got you now," he snarled, squeezing until her fingers went numb. The pipe clattered to the ground. She still had the shiv, but couldn't angle it properly to strike. Harker's voice cut through the struggle. "Finish her, and let's go. Guards will be here any minute." Crusher needed no more encouragement. He lifted Selina higher, then drove her down onto the hard-packed earth. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. Before she could recover, his boot caught her in the ribs. Pain exploded through her side. She rolled away from a second kick, but Crusher's longer reach let him grab her ankle. He dragged her back, lifting his boot again. Selina slashed wildly with the shiv, opening a long cut across his thigh. Crusher roared in pain and rage. His next kick connected solidly with her head, sending stars exploding across her vision. "That's enough," Harker called. "She's down. We need to move." But Crusher wasn't finished. His face was a mask of fury as he straddled Selina's prone form, massive hands wrapping around her throat. "Should have stayed in your lane, guard," he growled. "Should have just played nice and lived." Black spots danced at the edges of Selina's vision as she clawed at his fingers. The shiv had fallen somewhere in the struggle. Her lungs burned for air. Crusher's weight pressed down on her chest, making it impossible to buck him off. Harker paced anxiously at the tree line. "Come on! The longer we stay here." "Shut up!" Crusher snapped. "I'm gonna watch the light leave her eyes first. Been wanting to do this since she broke Briggs's wrist." Selina's struggles grew weaker. Her arms felt like lead weights. The world was starting to fade around the edges, narrowing to Crusher's hateful face above her. A sharp crack split the air. Crusher's head snapped up, his grip loosening slightly. What was... Another crack, closer this time. A bullet whizzed past Crusher's ear, embedding itself in a nearby tree. He released Selina's throat, scrambling backward. "Contact!" a voice shouted from the darkness. "Two suspects, one officer down." Selina rolled onto her side, gasping desperately for air. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw flashlight beams cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Dark figures moved with military precision. Weapons raised. "Down on the ground!" The voice was familiar. Derek Walsh, commanding and steady. "Hands where we can see them!" Crusher looked wildly between the approaching officers and the tempting darkness of the forest. His hesitation cost him. Two SWAT officers tackled him from behind, driving him face first into the dirt. Despite his size, he couldn't throw off both of them. Harker had already disappeared into the trees. Gunfire erupted as officers spotted movement in the darkness. Someone shouted, "Suspect fleeing northeast," followed by the crashing sounds of pursuit. Derek appeared at Selina's side, his familiar face tight with concern. "Jesus, Vega, you look like hell." He helped her sit up, steadying her when the world tilted sickeningly. "Got your message from the security camera. Figured something big was going down, so we set up a perimeter. Good thing, too." Selina tried to speak, but her bruised throat wouldn't cooperate. She pointed weakly toward where Harker had vanished. "Don't worry about him," Derek assured her. "We've got teams blocking all escape routes. Dogs, too. He won't get far." He keyed his radio. "Need medical here for Officer Vega. Multiple injuries, possible concussion." More shots echoed from the forest, followed by shouts of, "Suspect down!" Selina sagged against Derek's shoulder, the last of her strength finally giving out. Her throat felt like it was on fire, and every breath sent daggers through her ribs. Crusher continued struggling against his captors, cursing and threatening, but his words held none of their previous menace. He was just another prisoner now, headed for an even smaller cell. Red and blue lights strobed through the trees as more vehicles arrived. The morning air filled with radio chatter and the barking of police dogs. Derek kept one hand on Selina's shoulder, his solid presence anchoring her as the adrenaline began to fade. A team of officers emerged from the tree line, half carrying a handcuffed Harker between them. Blood ran down his leg from what looked like a bullet graze. His eyes locked with Selina's as they dragged him past. The look of cold calculation was gone, replaced by something closer to fear. As the first rays of dawn broke over Stonewall Correctional, the SWAT team's breach was swift and decisive. Tear gas canisters hissed through the air, filling Block C with choking clouds. The sharp crack of flashbangs echoed off concrete walls, disorienting the rioters who had held the cell block for hours. Officers in tactical gear stormed in behind plastic shields, their boots thundering on metal catwalks. Inmates scattered like roaches, some raising their hands in immediate surrender while others tried to fight back. Batons whistled through the air, meeting flesh with dull thuds. "Get down! On your knees!" The commands rang out over and over, punctuated by the metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut. Through the chaos, Selina limped forward between two SWAT officers, her uniform torn and blood-stained. Her throat bore vivid purple bruises from Crusher's attempt to strangle her, and dried blood caked one side of her face. But her eyes were clear and hard as steel as she surveyed the block she'd fought so hard to protect. The guards who had been on duty during the riot stopped in their tracks, staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Word had spread quickly about the female officer taken hostage in Block C. Most had assumed she was dead, or worse. "Holy shit," one young guard whispered. "She made it." Another veteran officer crossed himself, muttering, "Never seen anything like it." More inmates were being dragged out of their cells, forced to kneel in rows along the block's main floor. Many bore fresh injuries from the SWAT team's entry. Others showed older wounds, testament to the brutal fighting that had erupted during the riot. The prisoners who recognized Selina fell silent, their expressions ranging from respect to outright fear. They had witnessed firsthand what she was capable of. Some dropped their eyes, unable to meet her steady gaze. A commotion near the shower area drew attention. Two officers were struggling with Marcus Reaper Cole, who thrashed and cursed as they tried to chain him. "Get your hands off me!" he snarled, managing to throw one guard aside before a baton strike to the back of his knees brought him down. Selina walked over slowly, each step measured and deliberate. Marcus looked up at her approach, his scarred face twisting with hatred. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You're nothing but a—" "Shut up," Selina cut him off, her quiet voice carrying more weight than his shouting. "You played both sides and lost. That's all there is to it." The guards finally got the chains secured, yanking Marcus to his feet. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by impotent rage as other inmates watched his humiliation. The feared Reaper had been outmaneuvered and beaten by the very woman he'd tried to betray. "Get him out of my sight," Selina ordered. The guards were quick to comply, shoving Marcus toward the exit where transport vans waited to take the riot's ringleaders to maximum security. More officers pressed forward, eager to hear firsthand what had happened. How had she survived? How many had she fought? The questions tumbled over each other until Derek waved them back. "Give her space," he ordered. "She needs medical attention." Selina swayed again, the last reserves of her strength finally giving out. Derek caught her arm, steadying her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was fading fast, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and pain. Through blurring vision, she watched as order was restored to Block C. Inmates were systematically searched and secured. Evidence was collected: weapons, contraband, and the tools the escape crew had gathered. The air still hung heavy with tear gas, making eyes water and throats burn. A medical team hurried forward with a stretcher, but Selina waved them off. She would walk out of this block on her own 2 feet. Derek stayed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled. The remaining inmates watched in silence as she made her way toward the exit. Some nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. They had witnessed something remarkable. A single officer who refused to break, who had turned their own violence back against them. Near the block's entrance, Selina paused. She turned to face the assembled prisoners one last time, her voice carrying clearly despite its raspy quality. "Riot's over!" The words fell like a judge's gavel, final and absolute. The long night of violence and chaos was finished. Whatever illusions of power the rioters had held were shattered, leaving only the cold reality of their failure. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, cutting through lingering tear gas to illuminate the scene. Selina stood framed in the doorway, battered but unbowed. Behind her, the sounds of order being restored echoed through the cell block. Radio chatter, rattling chains, the measured footsteps of officers going about their duties. She had faced the worst they could throw at her and emerged victorious. Not through superior strength or numbers, but through a combination of cunning, determination, and sheer refusal to submit. The quiet guard they had mistaken for an easy target had proved to be anything but. Derek watched her with a mixture of pride and concern. "Ready?" he asked softly. Selina nodded, finally allowing herself to lean on his support. Together, they walked through the doors of Block C, leaving behind a night that would become legend within the walls of Stonewall Correctional. The afternoon sun beat down on Stonewall Correctional as Selina sat on the concrete steps outside Block C, her back against the cool metal railing. Medical staff had cleaned and bandaged her wounds, but she'd refused further treatment. The physical pain felt distant now, overshadowed by bone-deep exhaustion and the slow, dawning reality that she had survived. Her torn uniform still bore dark stains, some her blood, some belonging to others. The bruises around her throat had darkened to angry purple, and her knuckles were swollen and split. But she was alive, breathing the sweet air of freedom after hours trapped in that concrete hell. Inside the facility, order was being methodically restored. Teams of guards conducted thorough searches, confiscating weapons and contraband. The dull thud of cell doors echoed across the yard as blocks were systematically locked down. Ambulances came and went, ferrying injured inmates to the prison infirmary or local hospitals. The riot's leaders faced harsh consequences. Harker and his surviving crew were isolated in solitary confinement, their dreams of escape replaced by the cramped reality of 6x9 cells. Marcus Reaper Cole had been transferred immediately to maximum security, his reputation in tatters. Those who had assaulted officers or participated in the violence were identified and segregated, awaiting new charges. Derek Walsh approached, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed one to Selina and settled beside her on the steps. For a long moment, they sat in companionable silence, watching the controlled chaos of the prison's recovery. "You know," Derek finally said, his voice quiet but firm, "I've been working corrections for 15 years. Seen 3 riots, countless fights, more shanks than I can count. But I've never seen anything like what you did in there." Selina took a slow sip of coffee, welcoming its bitter warmth. "Did what I had to do." "No," Derek shook his head. "You did more than that. When we got your signal, that Morse code with the camera, we thought maybe you'd found a safe spot to hide. Nobody expected." He gestured at the block behind them. "Nobody could have done what you did. Survived that. Turned it around." A group of officers walked past, nodding respectfully to Selina. Word had spread quickly through the facility about her actions during the riot. How she'd broken free, hunted down the escape team, prevented a bloody breakout. The quiet, professional guard they'd known had revealed herself to be something else entirely. A warrior who had turned captivity into her hunting ground. "The inmates are calling you La Loba now," Derek continued with a slight smile. "The wolf. They're telling stories about how you moved through those tunnels like a ghost, picking them off one by one." Selina's lips twitched. "Probably getting taller with each telling. Maybe. But the truth is impressive enough." He studied her profile. "You're not just another CO to them anymore, or to us. You've changed things here." She understood what he meant. The dynamics of prison life were built on carefully maintained boundaries, between guards and inmates, between authority and submission. She had shattered those lines, becoming something that defied easy categorization. A guard who fought like a convict, who understood the brutal language of violence, but wielded it in service of order. More staff members passed by, some stopping to express their relief at her survival, or amazement at her actions. Each interaction carried a new undercurrent of respect, even awe. They looked at her differently now, seeing past her gender and quiet demeanor to recognize the steel beneath. "The warden wants to give you a commendation," Derek said. "There's already talk about promotion to tactical response team." Selina shook her head slightly. "Not interested in medals." "No, I suppose you wouldn't be." He paused. "Want to talk about what happened down there? In the tunnels?" Images flashed through her mind. The desperate fighting in narrow passages, the metallic taste of blood, the look in Crusher's eyes, the old instincts that had risen to the surface, sharp and deadly as ever. "Nothing to talk about," she said quietly. "They thought being a woman made me weak. Being a guard made me soft. They were wrong." Derek nodded, understanding what she left unsaid. The streets of Houston had forged her long before she put on a uniform. The violence she'd survived in her youth had simply been waiting, dormant but ready, until circumstances demanded its return. The sun was lowering toward the horizon now, painting the prison walls in shades of orange and gold. Shift change was approaching, and fresh guards were arriving to relieve those who had worked through the riot. Life at Stonewall would gradually return to its normal rhythms, but something fundamental had shifted. Selina finished her coffee and slowly stood, her muscles protesting every movement. The day's physical and emotional toll was finally catching up with her. But she refused to show weakness, keeping her spine straight and her steps measured. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.